Hey everybody, it's Book of Katherine, and we are tackling a rather large subject on episode 2 of What Did I Say Now? So, I talked about the Antichrist on my Twitter feed because it's my Twitter feed. It's a lot easier to talk about tough things on your Twitter feed than it is to do on YouTube. And the fact of the matter is that if I hadn't, I wouldn't have figured out that the explosion might have been coming, and then it actually did come. But I never would have guessed that an explosion was coming this year in the Mesopotamian region and the one that actually happened in Beirut. I never would have actually guessed that if we hadn't already been delving into Revelations and I hadn't already outlined all of the Antichrist. And so for those of you who are new, I'm just going to assume you don't know anything that I'm talking about and kind of start from the beginning. If you're new to my channel or new to either one, Twitter or YouTube, you're probably thinking, well, you're already at Revelations 18. Most of Revelations is before. What happened to the white rider? What happened to the seals? What happened to the trumpets? What happened to the cups? So I'm going to talk you through that. So first of all, numero uno, the big thing that you need to know, because I do have friends that do care about this. This is their faith. I have a few of them, and we've had some battle royales. And now it's funny because now we're kind of like, oh, this and oh, that. It's kind of, we're weaving together now and finding a lot more. And it's a lot more of us. All of us are starting to get much more involved now instead of the beginning where we are much more separated. A lot more people are involved in my group in digging into the same subjects. It's been very, very interesting. But it got rough during the Antichrist portions. I have to be honest. It got really rough in there. And I'd say the roughest part, and so just expect that in your groups is what I guess I'm saying. The roughest part was when I came up against Paul and Peter. When I read the texts, Paul, it's obvious to me that Paul probably is the beginning of the Antichrist. He's not, I would throw out all of his texts. If anything, when you say that there are prophets, he's not an apostle. Let's just start right there. Paul isn't an apostle. It started when I was like, okay, that's it. If everyone had been referring to these predictions, this third temple, on and on and on, and Daniel 9, all these predictions about the future. And the interesting thing is that they always would go back to what Paul said. So finally I was like, let me just get everything they say about the Antichrist. Let me figure out everything about the Antichrist. That's very hard to do, to actually get that outlined. There's very few places that list everything that's said about the Antichrist. And I found out why that was. Because then you find out that Peter and Paul disagreed on the Antichrist. And Peter was a disciple of Jesus. And Paul wasn't. Peter and Paul actually disagreed on quite a bit. And Peter was saying, the Antichrist is among us. And Paul was saying, no, it's going to be a long ways off. And so I just ended up chucking everything that Paul said. And in the end, because I did that, I started looking all the text in a totally different way. I figured out that Daniel 9 in the Message translation, I figured out that Daniel 9 was about Antiochus, the fourth, Antiochus Epiphanes, the fourth. It seems pretty obvious. The third temple definitely seems to be Jesus Christ. He says, I'll tear down this temple and build it up again. He's the third temple. Seems pretty clear about that. And then finally, the Antichrist, if you want to call it the Antichrist, I think pretty much it's the white rider. It says that these seals will come undone. If you want to look at where the seals come, there's seals, and then there's cups, and then there's trumpets. The first seal is a white rider. I don't know if you want to call that an Antichrist or not. But the first seal, in my opinion, is Prince Albert in 1838 or 1840 when he marries Queen Victoria. And I go through on my feed, I finally outline it. There's a long thread, and I'll try and include it down below And I just write down all the evidence. I mean, straight down to these huge explosions that happen, the atomic bomb, when the heavens, when the earth is curled like a scroll on back. That's exactly what you guys know, an atomic bomb. The heavens were scrolled back. I mean, our earth was scrolled back. Our earth was like a moon turned to blood. That's exactly what Hiroshima land was. It was the earth was moon turned to blood. When it says that there were hail falling, 100-pound hail falling. Yeah, that's right. That's how heavy. I looked it up. Go ahead and look it up. That is how heavy the bombs ended up being when they started bombing at that time during that war. The bombs were they were like 114 pounds. They were all the bombs at that time in World War II were running at exactly 100 pounds. And when it says the saints were persecuted, go ahead and look. Go ahead and look at who were being persecuted the most. The majority of the people who died in those camps were Christians. The majority of the people who died in World War II were Christians. The Japanese came after Christians in China. People say China wasn't reached. They were. It says to the ends of the earth in Acts. It went all the way. Like I said, Paul makes it sound like it didn't, and it did. It went to Rome and all the way to the ends of the earth. There is a healthy Chinese Christian community. They reached the entire ends of the earth. Christianity had gone everywhere, and they knew themselves as Jews. And World War II just wiped them out. But I outline it like to the wars, to the famines, everywhere. Right down the line, these predictions of when I see them as predictions, that's what I was looking at them. This book is just so tight. It was fascinating to me as a literary analyst. Like, that's why I can't get away from it, because it's so intensely, there's nothing like it to find something that's telling the future. I haven't ever seen anything like that was written 2,000 years ago that so amazingly predicts the future. And here this guy is John. He was an apostle of Jesus Christ, and Rome tried to kill him. The Roman emperor took him out, put him in boiling oil, and he didn't boil. And so they had to put him on an island. And so that's where he had revelations. It's so fascinating to hear these stories. And so anyway, I'll try and include the link below. But that's what got us started, is tracing. It's so interesting all the time. Tick, 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 tick of these wars and rumors of wars. And it starts. So if there was ever an Antichrist, we traced it back to 1840 with Prince Albert. And with the Great Exposition, when he basically started this new idea of socialism and capitalism with Marx. He went to school. Marx went to the same schools as he did in Germany. It all started with Germany. Prince Albert was German, and so was Queen Victoria. She was German. And this had this combined, Prince Albert had a brother in Germany, and they just started this German empire that spanned the globe, that her sons and daughters went all throughout Europe, married all the princes and kings in Europe. And then what did they do? Once she died, boom, World War II, and just massacred everyone and accumulated incredible amounts of wealth. And one thing, let me give you like a really interesting thing that I learned from all that. The Commonwealth didn't die in World War I. They only required Americans to die. It wasn't even their war. It wasn't their war. That's like the purpose of it. The purpose was to murder Americans. Because Americans were the only ones that stood up against the Pope, stood up against the German Protestant church. It says, if you read Lincoln's vow against the Catholic Church, it's an incredible document, 32 pages long. And it said that Lincoln towered over all the archbishops, over all the Catholic bishops, over all the priests, and over all the Protestants who had sold their votes to Rome. It said he just stood towering above all of them and stood as a justice for all the citizens who didn't have rights, to make sure that they had rights. And he would sit there and make sure that the law protected one and all. And he said it's always the same fight. The citizens of common humanity versus the rights of kings. And I was like, wow, that's exactly what I'm going through today. I'm already, like, every time we trace something up, we run into a king. I just watched tape of Prince Charles doing what? Skip the hand. He was going down the line and he refused to shake our vice president's hand. He pretended like our vice president wasn't even there. He acted like it was a ghost. He shook everybody's hand, Merkel's hand, all these people down the line, and then just skipped him like he was a ghost. Because why? Because in America, we give equal rights to all human beings. Whereas he and his Commonwealth of 53 nations, they don't have equal rights for everyone. They have a divine right of kings. The kings rule over all. So they keep the same DNA. They rule. They marry into the same DNA. They're inbred. They've all been, marrying within the same bloodlines. And so, it's awful. They have horrible diseases and everything. Not too smart, easy to beat. Whatever. There's just so many of them. And so other nations play them. Other nations are able to play them so easily. And those are terrifying nations. Terrifying nations. So Japan, terrifying nation. Terrifying nation. And for example, they are an honorary Aryan nation, inducted by Hitler to the Aryan nation because they're a partner with Germany. Did horrific things to China, but we never hear about that, do we? So now they're like the third largest polluter in the world. Massive empire. So anyway, that's the review of what I did. So one of the ways that we have moved our way up here to Revelations 18, Revelation 16 seems to be happening now there seems to be the bubonic plague out with the sinking sores. Also, the oceans are washing up. The second verse is all the sea will die. All the animals in the sea will die. I just did a video where everything's washing up ashore. Starfish are washing up ashore. All the types of fish are washing up ashore. Dolphins are washing ashore 3 times the rate that they were before, about like 5-10 years ago. Now they're washing up at 3 times the rate across 4 states in the Gulf Coast. So now dead sea life are washing up on the shores of the Yukon in Alaska, Maine, Alabama, Texas, California. So that means every shore and in America. Then that means they're also doing it in Australia. There are documentarians doing it on Australia, how it's all dying away. And it says it right there in Revelation 16, everything in the sea will die. The sea will turn to his blood. And it's funny because all the environmentalists aren't sounding the alarms. They're just saying, oh, this is natural. Don't worry. These great environmentalists. They're like, oh, this is natural. Don't worry. And I think they know that if they sounded the alarm, people would start reading Revelation 16 and be like, oh, maybe we should read the Bible more. That's the only thing I can think of, is that they don't want people to search for an explanation for this because it's happening around the globe. All these people push climate change and look, everything's dying anyway. I mean, we just passed the Clean Oceans Act. We're doing an incredible amount to clean the ocean. And look, everything's dying and cleaning up ashore. And not only that, but you know what they're using in order to clean the shores? They're using the labor from prisons. They're using forced labor to clean the country clubs are like, well, we can't do it. That's just too much for us. So they're going to prisons. And the prison guys are like, they're used to it. This is good for them to give back. And I'm like, we're not a third world country. I don't think so. I couldn't, I'm just like, it's really hard for me to stomach. So check out that in your community. So it's something that should be talked about. So, and for the bubonic plague, I need to just say, make sure that you start showering. I know that we don't teach our kids. I can't believe it. I'm sitting there watching millionaires have their kids on TV, and their kids are dirty. They got spots all over their shirts and all over their faces. I'm like, you're a millionaire, and your kids don't even have washed clothes on them. They don't care about their kids. They're always just caring about themselves and whether their Ferrari looks good. Don't give a crap about their kids. Well, their kids are going to die in a plague. I can guarantee you that right now. This thing will take them. It spreads by lice. It spreads by mites in the animals. So start taking really, really good care of your hygiene. Make sure you're on it. Make sure your house is clean, stuff like that, because this thing kills you in 24 hours. And it's not a pleasant 24 hours. Not at all. So in my next video, I'm going to go through what it says. It says anyone who has the mark of the beast and will have the plague. And so someone asked me, so how do you not get the, what's the mark of the beast? And I think it might be socialism, like anyone who has socialism or Buddhism. Like, I've been really trying to figure that out. And so I started reading. I've been trying to study this exact thing, like exactly what it says, the revelation of Jesus Christ. And I'm like, okay, so what is exactly being revealed here? I'm like, I just see a lot of destruction. So what's being revealed? So I've been going through Acts, and I've been going through the Old Testament. I've been going through all of the stuff, trying to find out exactly what. That's how I found out about Paul and everything. I mean, like, exactly what. So I'm going to do another video and try to go through exactly what I think. Like, I don't know. I'm just going to do my best. So, and we'll see. So anyway, that's this episode of, what did I say now? And I talked about the Antichrist. If as close to that, I was like, it was so sad because I was like, I think it already happened. I think the Antichrist came 150 years ago. I think he's killed like 500 million people a long, long time ago. We should know the Antichrist is here when when dead bodies are falling, like 100 million killed through tobacco. Right, Jeremy? 100 million killed through socialism, 100 million killed through plagues, 100 million killed through, I mean, you can see it just alone on like infections, just alone on biology. Like you see the beginning of the century, there are no vaccines. And by the end of the century, there are this many vaccines simply because the infections have grown. Like it's just insane. And I'm like, well, someone should have told us about that. Like someone, I feel like we're just, and then another thing that we learned was like the Euphrates dried up. So like, I haven't done anything where I go through every single cup and every single trumpet, like every single thing. But when COVID came by, we had just finished, we'd been for a while, for like a year and a half or something. We'd been like, everyone, when they would ask me, I would tell you guys on Twitter, I'd be like, I really think we're right at the Euphrates drying up. Like that looks, we're like right at the Euphrates. And we'd be at the Euphrates drying up, and then we'd rewind and go and match things up and be like right at the Euphrates drying up, rewind it. And then COVID hit. And we were like, where does that fit? And then I looked down like, a little bit further in the book, and it said that they dumped the cup into the air. And I was like, oh, no. And that's when I got really scared, because it said dump the cup into the air, and then it said hail and everything, and we got hit with hail, and friends across the U.S. got hit with hail at all these different times, and I was like, and I was like, drop it, like, it's like, you know what I mean? Like, drop pants, run, get on the camera, and just be like, please get out, please get out, please get out. Too many things lined up, and so I was like, gotta say something. And so now I kind of feel like the same thing. I'm like, what the heck do you mean? What the heck do you mean there's 17 counties and provinces with the Black Plague? I kind of feel the same way now a little bit. So it's surreal last night or this morning being like, hi everybody on my Twitter account. Because China's downplaying it. China's like, oh, we've had a case of a child with the bubonic plague and 3 rats. And then you read a little deeper and they're like, this is the 17th province that's gone into emergency mode after cases have been found in 17 counties from August to September. And I'm like, 17? You've had 17 provinces and you're just telling us now 17? Like, give us a map of China, of everything. And then I'm just like, wait a minute. Didn't I just hear there was a super spreader in India who they're still traveling over there in that lovely Greek 5 continents over there. A super spreader in India hopped on over and did Italy, Germany, and like some other nation, and then came back 70 years old, and they had I said this on Twitter too. Then they had to quarantine 40,000 people because he's still going to one of their pagan rituals or whatever. So he goes amongst it, and they had to quarantine 40,000 people. Like, that's a super spreader. 40,000 people. Because he went to 3 of the hottest spots, Germany and Italy and some other place. The hottest ever. Probably because he says he's some guru. Comes back, and let me remind everybody that China has just done the Silk Road. Just connected everything with those lovely rainbow channels. Silk Road. So he's just connected all these big rail routes over to Europe. And I'm like, so the 17 provinces over here are now connected by rail in Europe. And all I know is when Trump was like, shut down travel to China in January, they were all like, you stupid son of a... And I'm like, oh, really? And you had the Black Plague. So now every time Spain's like, oh, we're going to shut something down, I'm like, well, what are you shutting that down for? Like, I'm now super, super paranoid. Like, the fake media, I'm like, well, what are you shutting it down for? What are you shutting it down for? Is anyone looking for the Black Plague? Is anyone even... Oh my gosh, it spreads so fast. So please stay safe. So, and I'll talk about the next thing on it. I keep on talking about like the bad stuff, like all this or whatever, like all the things that if you don't, and now all the bad stuff's happening or whatever. So I've had to really search because it's not obvious. I don't think it's obvious in the text. It's taken a long time. I'll talk about the other side of it of like what's the good stuff, or I don't know if what it considers to be good. Oh, it's going to be exhausting. I'm going to really try my best, you guys. Just, like, I don't know how to do that with, I don't know. I guess everything is offensive today, but, or maybe it's not. I've been watching some really great videos and I'm just like, maybe it's just the mainstream media that's so hetchy, like uptight or whatever, or maybe it's just this certain generation that's so uptight, because there's a lot of other continents where people are a lot more, even with religions that are super tight, they're still a lot more interested in talking, if you know what I mean. Like, they're still a lot more interested in just listening, you know what I mean? And so it's going to be very interesting to see. I want to really hear people's feedback. I could mess up. I guess that's what I'm really worried about doing. I'm really worried about getting it wrong. Because it's not, you know what I'm saying? Like, well, good. You know what? You guys can just correct it. That's good. We'll just do that. So I'm going to try on the next one around, and we'll talk the mark of the beast versus not having the mark of the beast, what that looks like on the next one around. So that's episode 2 of What the Heck Did I Say Now? All right. Love you guys. Mwah. Subscribe down below. I actually, that is time for me to lay down and take a break in between. So, I do that all the time. So don't worry. That's FND. It'll go away. I promise. But I'm going to have a hard time talking now. So I'm like little distracted. Yes. Go ahead and, donate down below and then, donate down below and then subscribe. So, I'll do better on the next one. Mwah. I love you guys so much, and I'll see you around the corner. And I'm really sorry if this is new to anyone, then I'm really sorry that's bad news, but please be prepared. Please. I know I'm so sick and I'm in bed all the time. I know we've certainly changed our practices for cleanliness, if that makes sense. Since I'm in bed all the time, we've made changes since we learned about the Black Plague. We've definitely made changes in our house. So I encourage you to do the same, okay? Love you guys. Bye.